I ordered a red wiggler worm mix from Midwest Worms. I wanted to try this product out and see how it does in a brand new worm bin. So I've actually already started getting a worm bin together. I've never actually tried this mixture before, but it looks pretty good, and it's different than if you're just ordering like a pound of worms. What this is it's a mixture of worms, cocoons, and worm castings. Basically, it's everything you need to get started with a worm bin. I actually am not sponsored by Midwest Worms, but one thing that I like about Midwest Worms is their packaging. They go above and beyond with packaging, and I've ordered worms from several different worm farms and suppliers, and packaging is extremely important because it makes the difference of how healthy your worms are when they arrive to you. I've had several times with other companies where worms arrive dead, and that is no fun. I have not had that happen with when I've ordered worms from Midwest Worms. You can tell a lot about the health of the worms by smelling this bag. And if you smell anything that smells like sour milk or anything rancid, that means your worms are starting to struggle. It starts out as a light odor, but it does not take long for that odor to turn into a really bad smell. And from my experience, the worse the smell, the worse the health of the worms. So if you ever order a bag of worms and it smells, it stinks, like if you can smell it before you even open the box, you might have some dead worms in there, and you might want to contact your worm supplier and let them know. But this bag, there was no odor. All this material right here, it smells like soil, like a forest floor. There's no bad odors in it, which tells me these worms are probably in really good health. And they've been in this box since, let's see, either Sunday night or Monday, and today's Thursday. So yeah, they've been in there for several days, and they're still doing good. And these came all the way from Missouri to Oklahoma. So here we go. We got a gallon of material here. And so here's what I see. I see leaf material. I see healthy worms. So these are red wigglers here. Midwest Worms is known for shipping in bedding plus worm castings, and probably that's why I don't get dead worms when I order from them. If you buy from some of the big suppliers, you might be used to purchasing like a full half a pound or a full pound of worms, and that's not what this is. This is a red wiggler worm mixture to get your worm bin started. And so these worms appear to be adults, and which means they're gonna start breeding too and making cocoons and more babies. So and the way you can tell if they are adults or not is if you look closely, you'll see a almost like they have a turtleneck on around the neck, what might be like you might call the neck area. If you work at an office or a place where they use a lot of paper, you're probably going to have access to paper. And to start this bin, I am using shredded paper. So I used about half of this bag. And this is pretty finely shredded paper. It doesn't really matter if it's chopped up into little pieces or, you know, I will say if you try to shred paper by hand, it does take a lot longer. So I like to grab paper that's already been shredded from the office shredder. So what I did here is I moistened all of this shredded paper, and you know, you can't just put the dry paper in there and then add the worms. That will kill your worms pretty quick, because the you know, the worms are just gonna their juices are gonna get sucked up into the paper, and they're not gonna live very long. So you have to get that paper moist. And a good, you know, way to tell how what the proper moisture level is, if you will add a little moisture at a time, and you want to do the squeeze test, and you want to squeeze it, and what you want to see is, you know, maybe a drop of water form. I'm squeezing it and a few drops of water coming out here. What you don't want to do is squeeze it and water's pouring out. But you know, that's how you can tell. Just give it a squeeze, and if a couple of drops of water fall out, then you know your bedding is probably pretty good. All right, and I'll be able to see this better once it's in here. Okay. All right, so there's you know, little pieces of like mulch and stuff in here. There's leaves, dry leaves, which are gonna get composted down, and eventually the worms will munch on those. There is a decent amount of worms in here too. I'm not seeing cocoons yet, but you know, it's kind of like the luck of the draw, kind of like, you know, how many how much different variety of stuff you're getting, because this is coming straight out of an outdoor windrow, and if the worms haven't been breeding and laying cocoons, then you might not see very many cocoons in there. But if it's like early spring, you might find cocoons. And what I do see in here, and I'll try to zoom in on it, but I do see some baby worms. So there's different variety of worms in here, some adults, some babies, and they're all looking healthy. I haven't seen one dead worm yet. One problem you can have with starting a new worm bin is if you don't have enough biology in your worm bin, if you don't have enough beneficial bacteria and fungi and all the helpful critters in there, then it can take longer for your vermicompost bin to really get going. So this has everything in it that you need to get started. Worms, vermicompost is already in there. And I'm gonna, oh look, there's a little guy. There's a baby worm. I'm gonna try to zoom in on it here. But I have it on the tip of my finger here. So there were cocoons that hatched recently. So yeah, this came straight from an outdoor windrow. So it's basically, you know, Midwest Worms took it from their worm farm, and then you get to take it and start your own worm farm with it. So everything that was that I had in there, I mixed together with the wet bedding, and you want to make sure that you get the worms into their bed and get them where it's moist very quickly after you get the package, like same day. You don't want to let it sit and wait till the next day, because the worms, they're not loving life as much when they're in that box. They want to be, they want to be out of that box into their new worm bin. So, and as far as the worm bin that I'm using, these are actually mortar trays, black mortar trays, and they work really good for a worm bin. They're the right depth. So this thing is, no more than 5 to 6 inches deep, and that's what red wigglers like. They like a more shallow depth. They're not like your Canadian night crawlers. They're not going to burrow down deep. They do good in a shallow system. All right, so what I'm going to do now, so these worms are probably hungry. They probably haven't had some food since they were pulled out of the windrow in Missouri. So I'm going to give them some food. Now, this is pretty important, and this is how a lot of people will kill their worms starting out, is they get too ambitious with feeding. They go crazy with feeding, and they're think their worms need to eat way too much. And what happens if you overfeed your worms? Your bin is going to get sour and smelly. Your worms are going to gorge themselves until they basically blow up, and then you're going to, worst case scenario, the whole bin, the whole tray goes anaerobic, and you lose every worm in there. So here's a tip to not kill your worms when you're feeding them or when you're starting a bin. So I'm going to only feed them a little bit to start out. And so I'm going to, right here in the middle, I'm going to make a little pit here. Okay. And now I got some frozen asparagus. It's the tips that we cut off from what we ate. So I'm going to dump them in there. All right. And now I'm going to cover them up. And I like to do it right in the middle. You could pick a side. I just, for some reason, like to put it in the middle. And that's all I'm going to put in there to start out. Because what I want is I want those worms to get in there, and I want them to start eating that and breaking it down. And then once I see that food is disappearing, I'm going to add some more. And once the bin gets really established, the worms can eat a lot. Some literature says they can eat, like up to half of their body weight or more per day. So that's all I'm going to start them with, though. And that will break down pretty quickly because it's frozen, plus all this worm mixture that I added. It has a whole ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, all sorts of little critters that you can only see under a microscope. And the little critters are gonna break down the food scraps, and then the worms are gonna go in there too and eat the mixture. All right, so there's one more thing that I'm gonna do with this, and that is I'm going to add a mulch on top. So in certain climates, worm bins can, you lose moisture too quickly. I'm over here in Oklahoma, and especially during the summer, when it's dry, I have to really control moisture. So I use brown leaves as a mulch on top. So I got this bucket, 5-gallon bucket of leaves, and I'm just gonna put them on top here. And it's a natural mulch. Now I have a nice mulch layer there, and that's gonna help control moisture levels, okay? And eventually this stuff is gonna break down too, and the worms will get to it. They won't get to this for a while though, because it would take a while to break down. So this bin is ready to go, and I'm gonna set it on a shelf in my garage, and I'm gonna let the worms start working it, and I'm excited to try out this new red worm mix.